You're listening to Through the Dark Woods podcast, and I'm your host, Josea Tamira Crossley. If you're looking for support to work with your own grief or training in how to support others through grief and trauma, or would like to find out more about our amazing online community, check out darkwoodsofgrief.com. So I'm here today with Aiden and super excited to see you because it's been a while, and really excited to chat with you today about, the training that you were in, like the beta version, or like our first year of the training 2 years ago. And it was such an incredible journey with all of us. And now you're up to some really cool things that you've been doing since then. And so maybe we could start with just, if you want to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, what you were going through, and if your work, if you feel like it's like applicable, prior to stepping into the grief tending and ritual facilitation training in, I guess, 2023, right? Yeah.
Yeah, feels like a lifetime ago, and I'm excited to reflect on that and chat with you today. Yeah, what was I doing before grief work? I don't even remember. It feels so integrative into my life now that I don't really remember what it's like to not have done this training. Um, but before I met you and started processing my grief, I also hadn't really heard the word grief used anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a part of my life in a way that I had words for. Yeah, and what brought me to this work is I had a couple of miscarriages and found you through just the group that you were hosting. And um, yeah, as I was going through the weekly grief meetups, I was just feeling really called to step into this work. Um, and yeah, it felt like something that was so absent from our society and so big, it's present in everything. And now that I've got the language for it, I see grief everywhere. It's just the parallel of love, and it's all intertwined.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, exactly. That's so beautiful. Yeah, and um I know that you had done like quite a bit of facilitation work though prior to coming into the training. You definitely came in being like, I understand facilitation and I understand creating safe space for people. I mean, partly because of, I think, where you come from personally with your journey, but also just all the facilitation that you've done.
Yeah, I've been a teacher and a facilitator most of my life, from teaching Taekwondo to dance to acro yoga. And I think that the acro yoga community was really where I started to get deeper into facilitation, because we also did a lot of facilitations around consent conversations and social justice. And it was really intertwined together, to create really sustainable communities, instead of just having an activity that we participate in. So sometimes I forget that I've done that work because it wasn't really on my resume. It's not
Yeah.
work. Um,
Yeah.
but
Totally.
also it's been really impactful for my life in many capacities to have a community that's so deeply integrated in those ways. And having language about grief, I think, is just make those communities deeper and expand the privilege. So,
Beautiful. Yeah. Do you find you kind of like look back on the work you were doing before the facilitation and like the community building and kind of see the layers of like working with grief that was already there, but just not having the language for it? Or how would you? Yeah, I'm just curious about that.
yeah, I think definitely. I don't think that you can talk about social justice without grief being integrated.
Yeah.
Power and privilege and grief are just enmeshed. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, I think that I was already navigating these concepts, but with just less language.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think that that's so important because a lot of time kind of in the mainstream when people hear grief or think about grief, they think just of like when you have a major loss of someone you love personally, then we grieve, but like we don't necessarily think about the aspects of, like you said, like social justice and um that kind of thing being so intertwined with grief and the need to be able to feel. So yeah, thank you. So let's go back a little bit further. And this is a question that I love to ask everyone because I just think it's so interesting how, you know, our origin story like personal origin story informs the work that we end up doing. And so how would you say, if you could just reflect a little bit on how grief and or trauma was held in your family of origin, like what kind of patterns or teachings around emotional expression were present there, and how do you feel like that's impacted you in, like, you know, as you have healed and evolved and changed yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it just didn't exist. Like
Mhm.
there was no processing of grief. There was no talking about grief. Um, I also think that like a lot of people start talking about grief when there's like major losses, and there haven't been like any close major losses in my family to like reflect on that, and see how that's processed, at least in terms of like somebody dying. But like, yeah, there have been major losses. Like my mom is completely disconnected from her family. And yeah, I think that there's like a lot of grief in my family that's just like not talked about. And I think that because it's maybe not around people dying, there's just like no language for that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you find like where you're at now, does that kind of ripple back into your family at all? Like, do they, yeah. Because there tends to be kind of like a, you know, when we're the healer in our, well, I don't know, maybe you have other healers in your family too, but when we're the primary person who's like doing the work and doing the healing in our family, it like tends to kind of like ripple back, sometimes in negative ways, but sometimes in positive ways too. So,
Yeah, I think that everything I do and learn goes back into my family in some capacity.
yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah, and I don't think that this is any different. Um, and I also feel like there's like still some like emotional barriers between me and my family. Like we still don't really like dive into how we feel very often. So um yeah. And I feel like that's okay. Like that's just like where we're at in our relationship, and that can be fine. Um but I've seen just like how I exist in the world, how that like ripples out. Also like beyond just like my family. But I have a lot of chosen family as well, and I can see how that affects them. Like the amount of times I'm like ask people in a week, like, is it grief that you're feeling? Is like a lot.
Uh-huh.
And the answer is usually like, yeah, I guess so.
Nice.
So yeah, I think that it's like rippled in many directions.
Beautiful. And to bring it like even a little bit more central, how would you say your relationship with grief changed throughout, like say from before you came into the our time together and through the training and afterwards?
Yeah, I think that I processed a lot in the training and before that in the program with the weekly calls. Yeah, I think that for me it started with a loss, as I've seen happen with many people, and then it like ripples into all of this. And I feel like I just like understand what grief feels like in my body so quickly now that I'm like, oh, that's grief I'm feeling. That makes
Mm,
sense. Like here's the element of loss or like longing or whatever that piece is. Um, and I can just like feel it and process it. And I think that one of the biggest things that came out of the training for me is just like the pendulation between grief and gratitude. And I think that that's something that I've done fairly naturally throughout my life, is like the pendulating between like difficult feelings and like gratitude. But
mm,
being able to like speak to it with in that way, I think it's been really helpful for me and also like people around me, because I'm like, yes, let's be in it. Let's be in the grief. Let's like not let it go away. We don't need to like throw a bunch of positive emotions on it. But also like there's a time when we need to like step
uh-huh.
like back out of the grief and like into gratitude and into like processing and regulation, because if we just like stay there all the time, that's also not healthy either. And there are like times when like being full in grief and like not swinging into gratitude are like what's needed. But like there has to be a point at some point where it like comes back into
Yeah,
balance.
totally. Yeah, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so and it is a natural thing for us to do that pendulation, but sometimes we get stuck, and then if I think if we don't know what's happening. So I love that you said just being able to articulate it. It's kind of made it clearer what you were doing already. That's really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and you said that you know like you know what it feels like right away in your body. What does it feel like? Yeah, what tells you?
That's a good question, and I don't know. Like I don't know that I can like describe how it feels in words. It's just like
Mm,
a somatic feeling in my body and like my intuition that just like
you're like, boom, that's
it's
I
like a
recognize.
little light bulb that's like, oh, grief. Welcome
Uh-huh.
back. I don't like you very much, but fine.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Here you are.
You recognize it and then you have more tools to be with it and just feel it and kind of work with it, sounds like.
Yeah. And even just like being able to speak to like I think even just being able to name it, like this is what I'm feeling is really powerful.
Yeah.
Because grief is like really overwhelming and intense a lot of the time, and to like not know what's happening or why is like really stressful for me, and I'm assuming a lot of people, but like I like
Exactly.
knowing what's going on. Um, so yeah, I feel like just being able to be like, oh, this is grief, and maybe I don't even know where the grief is coming from, or just like being able to be like, this is what I'm feeling, then I can like explore that a little bit further.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I was gonna say that you kind of like bridged into my next question because exactly like a lot of people avoid grief work because it feels overwhelming, I think. Like so they kind of are just like let me suppress it for as long as I can and just try not to feel it. And and I'm curious, like, I mean, particularly like being someone who's trans and just like what's happening in the world today. Do you think that going through the training helped you be able to kind of navigate the intensity of the collective as well as personal grief that
I think in a way, yes. I also just think that like my years existing in the world as a
uh,
trans person have also informed that. Um,
yeah.
yeah, like I'm not new to this. Like I've been out for over a decade. And while I think that the climate is like quite different now than when I came out, it's just different. Like there
Mm,
are just different struggles than there are now.
right.
Um, so I do think that it's been helpful. I think maybe more so for the people around me than
Mm,
myself. Like I think that yeah, being able to process grief and have those tools has been helpful. I also feel like I'm in a, a weird place because I have a toddler and like they give me hope for the
oh,
world, and I feel like I just like I have to like pendulate into gratitude so I don't fall apart, and hope, and like I have to like see the good in the world, and I have such a like good little community here where sometimes I like forget that the world is such a shit place outside of my community.
yeah,
Um, and
that's
I think I've just like had to distance myself from the world a little bit, and I don't love that I've had to do that, but I think just like for my sanity as a parent who gets like no sleep, I just like I can
yeah,
only absorb so much.
yeah.
And yeah, I think that if I
Mm,
didn't have a young child that I needed to like raise, I would probably be like more aware of what's going on in the world. And I am like I know what's going on, but I'm just like I've kept some emotional distance from it. I've had to just be like,
you're not focusing on it.
yeah, I've had to just be like, yes, that exists, but like look at what's around me and look at the people around me. And
Mm,
um yeah, I can also just see like a lot of hope in that, and that there's like a lot of people around me fighting. Um, so I don't know. And I've also like lost family through through what's going on in the world right now. So there's
mm,
grief in that too. But
mm, mhm. Yeah. Well, I love that. I mean, it's kind of like you're working with And I think that it's actually so necessary of a skill, like even for people who don't have children, but I mean, yes, of course, especially, and I just love hearing that you're kind of creating this, protective space for your little one and for yourself because you're so interconnected. And in a way that is like a powerful form of pendulation because you are aware of what's going on. It's not like you're totally burying your head in the sand, but you're choosing, what I'm hearing is that you're choosing where you're focusing your energy so that you can cultivate the space that has, more joy and more hope and kind of focusing on the beautiful things that are happening.
Yeah, and like not in a way that's like toxic positivity either. I think that we still need to acknowledge these things are happening and have an effect. But like, yeah, I think that also there's radical, like it's radical to feel joy and to like create safety and to like create a new world in my community. Like that radiates out, and I think that if I just like focus on all the things that aren't going well, then I would fall apart. So I need to like create what I want.
Yeah.
And I feel like if more people around start creating what they want, then like the fringes of that will like disappear because there's going to be a lot of like love and emotional processing and like processing of shame, and like I think we'll just be in like a more interconnected and better place if we also focus on what we want to see instead of just the deterioration of the world, because it needs to fall apart. Like it's all of these systems were not built in a way that's like sustainable and in a way that's like good for everybody. So um, I think yeah, there needs to be destruction before something comes out of the ashes. And I would just like rather focus on building what's coming out of the ashes. Otherwise, everything's just gonna fall apart.
Uh-huh. Beautiful. I love that. And like I really resonate with what you're saying. And I'm curious, like, because if I feel into like my own journey with grief, I feel like for me, like doing the grief work and doing it so actively and like intentionally, and really like working with the foundation of pendulation, for me it's like really expanded my capacity for joy like so much. And I'm curious, does that feel true for you as well?
Yeah, I think that I still have like I still feel like grief is like easier for me to touch than joy.
Uh-huh.
Because it's like more intense and it's just like you're in it. But I do think that it has like expanded my capacity for joy as well. And it's also like given me language for sometimes like why joy is complicated. Because like yeah, I'm afraid of loss when I'm feeling joy. Like I am like yeah, I just like feel like everything can be taken away when I'm in a place that's like really hopeful or really joyous. So even just being able to be like, oh, there is also grief in joy. Like,
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, yeah, because it's like it will be taken away. It's
yeah.
like it will. So it's like, so I love that. Just like encompassing that, like recognizing that is so powerful. Yeah.
I also feel like just like in the world and how I exist in the world when everyone is like feeling grief, I'm like, there's so much hope and joy and love and everything is gonna be okay. And then when everyone's like feeling really happy and joyous and like I'm just like something it's gonna like is looming.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. That's interesting. So you kind of like go to the opposite.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, interesting, interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. You being you.
Yeah.
It's like your special medicine, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, beautiful. So, do you feel like doing this work has affected your connection to your own like ancestral lineage or like cultural practices around grief? I'm really curious about that for you.
Um, I think this in combination with like some other things has definitely um affected that for me. I think like meeting Jana, my wife, has also like really broken that open for me.
Mm,
I
yeah,
think
he's so
I
into
think
that.
yeah, before I met them, I was kind of like exploring the idea of spirituality and like ancestors, but it was also like very kind of like atheist and was like, nah, these things don't exist because I can't explain them in a logical way. Um, but I also just like realized that you can't explain those, even though I like really try hard to. So yeah, I think that just like exploring those concepts together and like feeling that there were like more layers and things. And I feel like I'm someone that just like has a lot of access to those layers, and I always have.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, just like I felt like it was nice being around people who just understood that and just like it's like this is real, even if it doesn't make sense. Um, but in terms of like my cultural practices around grief, I feel like I've actually had a lot of grief around that. Like
Uh,
I don't feel like I have a lot of access to that. I feel um like I've been trying to like look into cultural practices, but just like I'm half Portuguese, and I feel like that's like the route I've been really like trying to look down. And it's just like colonized so early through
yeah.
Catholicism, and like I don't resonate Catholicism in any way. Like um and I feel like there are like there's more there, but it's just so hard to find. Like everything has been like washed away. There's no like I can't find any other cultural practices. It's just like Catholicism is the way and the only way, and it's always been this way. So I feel like there's some grief in that because I know that there at one time there would have been other cultural practices.
Yeah, totally.
Um, but yeah, I haven't like had a lot of access to that. I do feel like I've been trying to like integrate more into like the indigenous communities here. Um, which is like not my culture, so I also have to like be cognizant of that. Um, but yeah, just like being around people who are processing these things in
Mm.
cultural ways has also been really important, and it's been good for like decolonizing my mind and how things can be done, and just seeing that there are like more ways of doing things in a good way. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Beautiful. Mm.
I I also feel like I've met people in this training that I can like bounce these things off of when I have them. Like since doing this training, I've also done some training around being like a labor doula,
Wow.
and I attended my friend's birth, and it felt like a really like spiritual practice and time to be in together. And I was like driving home, and I was like, who's gonna get it? And I just like sent Janelle like a very long voice message. And she was like, you'll understand what I'm saying
Yeah.
right now.
Oh, that,
Um, so yeah, I feel like I've met people who like can connect with me in ways that I maybe haven't had.
I love that you brought that up. Yeah, because it is such a beautiful thing, the circle of connection that happens
Mhm.
because we're doing such deep work together, right? So it's like, how can we not just kind of fall in love with each other?
Yeah.
It's, yeah, that's so awesome. And so I'd love to ask you about, I know that you and Jana have been doing some grief circles at your place, I think in your home, yeah, in
Yeah.
Edmonton. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? Like how did that come about and how's it going? What's it been like? Yeah.
Yeah. We paused the last couple of months because I was going back to work and like figuring out the balance. Um, but Jen and I have like hosted a lot of events together in different capacities. And I really wanted to like do something with the grief work. And I also really heard that you should not do this work on your own and that you
Mm-hmm.
need like a co-pilot. Um, so yeah, Jenna and I decided to host some circles at our house. I we both felt like there was like a really big need for like queer and trans spaces where people could process these things in a way that was like really accessible. So we've been doing them for free out of our house. Um, and yeah, the circles have been fairly small, like from like 3 to 10 people, and it's just like always whoever needs to be there ends up showing up. And sometimes we like expect more people, and just like people back out. And um, yeah, it always just like ends up being whatever it needs to be. And it's been, I think, really healing for community. I also think that there seems to be like a common thread in a lot of my community where people are like healing from religious trauma.
Mm,
And yeah, especially as like queer people. And I think that like ritual in general is just like a really scary, tender thing. So it's been a bit challenging to like get people to come out. Because we have to like
that's
explain what
so
it is, but also just the way in which Jen and I facilitate is really like dependent on who shows up. So we can't be like, this is the structure for
right.
all of you neurodivergent humans who need structure, because it's just like that's not how we're doing it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're kind of improving to what the group needs more.
Yeah, and we have like a general idea of what's going to be done, but it like always shifts. We'll be like, oh, okay, we didn't plan to have like a rage session in the middle of this, but clearly we like need to move some shit.
Yeah.
So like, let's all get up and shake and make
Mm,
noises, and because that's what needs to happen right now, even though it was like very much not in the plan.
yeah.
So it feels, yeah, it's been a bit challenging to like balance that. And in a way that we've done that is like we've created a group for people to join, and then we describe in detail what's happened each time at the
Mm,
end so they can like get an idea of what they are. For the people kind of like lurking and not who aren't sure, they can like see what happened the previous time so they have some idea. And there's starting to be like some consistent structure.
yeah.
So that's like
Cool.
out of it naturally. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's been really good to like connect and
Mm,
have a space for those feelings. And it's just like different to be in a space with people who just like get it.
yeah.
Like we don't have to explain like what's happening with transness in the world and why that's complicated and what are all the layers. People just show up and they just feel it already. They
Yeah.
just like already know what that feels like and like have similar struggles with families and community work. And it's just like it doesn't need to be explained in the same way that it needs to be explained in groups of people that aren't trans and
Yeah.
queer. So yeah,
That makes
it's been nice to like have that space.
that's so beautiful. And yeah, I totally get the like, when you're improving and then people are like nervous to come in and they're like, well, what's going to happen? And you're like, I don't really know. And then they're like, oh my God, it's definitely such a fine balance. I mean, I even work with that when I'm having people come in to see me for somatic therapy because it's like, well, then they're like, well, what's going to happen in a session? And I'm like, it's total improv. Like, it's really, but I think there's like ways of being like, these are some of the types of things we might do. I love that you're doing like, this is what happened at the last one. And maybe there's ways of like laying boundaries around here's things that like definitely won't happen, like you won't have to do anything that you don't want to do, that kind of thing. But it's so interesting, the religious trauma piece, because when you were talking about your background, like your Portuguese background being Catholic and the Catholicism, like the early colonization, one thing that I was thinking about is like I had a teacher recently who she's like a total witchy spiritual person, but she is also Catholic. And so I learned from her just like so many of the rituals are actually like super magical, but that's because they actually like co-opted the indigenous rituals into Catholicism. Like pretty much wherever the church went, they did that because they kind of had to in order to get people on board. They had to be like, well, we'll still do these kind of things, but it's going to be, and then also I think not just that they had to, but also they wanted to because they knew the power of these rituals.
Mm-hmm.
We do these. And so it's actually like this really weird kind of paradox where that religion, I mean, obviously there's like lots of fucked up layers to it, but like that religion also holds some of the original teachings, I think, if you can kind of like extract them.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, it's so interesting though, like, yeah, because there is so many rituals in Catholicism, I really see how people would be, because of the layers of trauma, especially like you said, as being a queer person, trying to fit into that. Yeah, that's a lot of food for thought for
Yeah, I've also like thought about the idea of like stepping away from the word ritual,
mm,
um, just to like make it more inviting. Because like when we talk about what we do, people are like, "Oh, okay."
yeah.
Or like even with grief, I like sometimes I've thought of just like dropping the word grief too, because like people are like, "That's really scary," and I'm like, "You're just gonna like write your feeling, like
Yes.
it's gonna be okay," and
Yeah,
like
you're
it's
already having them. You're already having those feelings.
yeah. It's just like
Yeah.
we're just gonna like pass around a rock and you're gonna get a chance to like talk about how you're doing if you want to, and you don't even have to do that. Like it doesn't need to be intense or big, but like it also just doing those things, like small things, can be really intense and big. So I can't like promise that like it's not gonna be intense. Like it
Yeah.
might be.
Yeah.
So
Totally. Yeah. No, I love that. And I mean, it is such about, but I think the thing that people because we're so used to it being intense and very, very painful, right? Like,
mhm.
people don't know that it's actually going to feel good when it's held in like a safe enough space that it's actually going to start to feel good. So it's like, how do you language that? How do you communicate that to people so that they can feel safe enough to just come in a little bit, and yeah,
And I think that like part of it is just like being okay with people not showing up.
totally.
And like being like, yeah, you can be on the fringes and like watch this for however long you need to before you decide that like it's time, and maybe you never do. And like that's okay.
Yeah.
And just being trying to be like, I like this is who I am. And if you know who I am, like hopefully you know that I will create a space that will like hold that. And consent is like really mandatory in our spaces. Like if you want to leave, like that's fine. Just like let me know.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you don't have to like stay, you don't have to talk, you don't have to look at anybody. You could like go sit in a different room if you just like want to be close. Like we really do not care what you
Mm,
do. Like it's a space where you can just like show up as you are, and
mm,
we will have structure, but like you could also just be like fuck that, and like I will be like yeah great, fuck that, let's do something else. Like
mm, Yeah, I can imagine like knowing you that you would really create a lot of space for people to do what they need to do. And I agree that it's like, you can't like and sometimes I think just people knowing that it's happening, maybe that's the dosage that they need for healing. It's like just seeing that it's happening. But do you find that people who've come, like, do you have people come repeatedly?
yeah, like most of the people that come have come multiple times.
Yeah.
Like usually people are like nervous the first time, and then they're like, "Oh, this was actually really nice and really
Yeah.
helpful." And like, it's also just like, yeah, like you said, it's different when you're being held by like your own community.
Yeah.
It feels, I think, at least for me and what I've witnessed, is that it just like feels immediately safer to open those layers up because you don't have to explain them, and you're not like waiting for someone to like contradict you or like pick a fight with you. It's just like that's not going to happen. So
Yeah. That's yeah.
um, yeah, I think that yeah, a lot of people have found it helpful, and then like also a lot of people have left and been like, I convinced my friend that they should come, and it's
No.
like it's slowly growing, but also like yeah, through the winter it's just been. We live in Edmonton. It's cold. People don't want to like leave the house when it's like -30. Um,
Yeah.
So we'll see how it goes. It's also I think we've done like 4 or 5, so it's still like pretty new. We've been
Mm,
trying to do them monthly.
mm.
Yeah,
Awesome. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, and I really think I think it's so interesting because it's like having these what would you call it, like affiliation kind of spaces where like just queer people or like just Black people or just Indigenous people or like just these. I think it's like so there's a level of healing that can happen in those spaces that, like you said, it's just like less, takes the complexity and the sort of guardedness out of it, I would imagine. That's
yeah, and it's just like yeah, I think when people have shared experiences, be really powerful. Even if it's not in those spaces, like even just having spaces for grief, when you're like in a space with shared grief, like there's a lot of power in that too. or if it's like in a shared space about like a specific kind of grief. Like I've gone to like miscarriage groups where like I was definitely the only trans person there or queer person, but like because we were going through something similar and could like talk about it and feel it together, it was really powerful. So I think that just like any time that you're like with people that you don't need to like explain yourself to be seen, that can be really.
Yeah, beautiful. No, that's so true. Yeah. I mean, that's what I think that's what's so powerful and so decolonial about grief work, and coming together in community and like just grieving together is it's like you can actually see each other, in a way that you might not see the commonality that you have if it wasn't for, yeah, like having the miscarriage commonality or having just plain grief commonality. So that's really beautiful. And do you feel like the people that are coming regularly, do you feel like you've heard back from them that they're having like bigger shifts in their kind of overall
I
ex-
mean, I think that every queer person in this world is having big shifts right now. Um, yeah, and it's like people in general, it's like a time of transition in our society. So it's like yeah, I don't claim any of that. But
uh, uh-huh.
also like, yeah, probably they're having shifts in their lives in different ways. Um, I also like know most or all of the people as friends in different capacities too. So yeah, there's like multiple layers to it. I also
Yeah,
sometimes think that just like adding me to people's lives shifts.
totally. I definitely agree with that. Knowing you just a little bit, that I do. Yeah, that's so beautiful. Um, and I know, I mean, you haven't been working much since the training because you gave birth and you've been parenting. So I was going to ask you, if you've noticed ways that the grief tending practices have been that you've brought them into your professional work. So, and I am curious about that because I know you've done a little bit. But I'm also curious about if you've found them to be supportive in your parenting.
Yeah, I don't feel like I can really speak to professional work because I had only been back at work for 2 months and I had like just started doing some training again before I got laid off. But I think that they've been like really instrumental in my parenting. Um, I feel like I have felt like a lot of grief this year, just about like, yeah, ways in which like maybe I was raised and how I'm raising my kid differently. And um, yeah, just like touching on those pieces. Also just like the griefs of like not being good enough. It's like no
Mhm.
matter what you do, then there's like
Totally.
gonna mess up and like I have always like really prided myself on being like a really patient, gentle person. And then I have a baby who's like wonderful, but like very crazy, like bit a chunk of my chest off the other day.
Oh my God. Yeah,
And
they just
like
like
just
fear
like wild and feral and doesn't sleep. And like I love them and I love that. And I like want to like get them to like bring that into the world because like the world needs that. But also I'm like,
you'd like to
wow.
keep all your body parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh my God.
uh, yeah, and they're starting to like mellow out a little bit now. But but like other than the biting each other and just thing. But yeah, I just think that like I I think Jen and I have been doing a really good job of like just celebrating them as they are and just like letting them be their like weird little feral self and just yeah, like we like held them for like 6 months because they didn't want to be put down and we just were like okay cool then you just stay up with us and have just been like trying to tend to their needs in a way that's like really honoring who they are. And while like that sounds so lovely, it's also like moved a lot of grief in me because I'm like, I don't know that. Like I also don't want to like say that I wasn't held in that because I think that my parents also like tried their best to like hold me in all of my weirdness. Um, but yeah, I just like I think there's griefs in like how I was raised and like the pieces that I didn't get. And I think that with like every generation, we like learn a little bit more and we process a little bit more and we can like do a little bit more and we have like so much access to resources that like my parents didn't have access to. And yeah, I think that there's just been like a lot of grief in that. And then yeah, just like I have yelled at my child like pretty aggressively to the point where like the people downstairs the next morning are like, we weren't sure if we should come up because it sounded like you were losing your shit. And I'm like, yeah, well, when our baby cries for 4 hours at a time and is screaming in my face and I just like have no more capacity, I don't know what else to do. So
Mm.
like just like feeling the grief of like not doing things well and just like yeah, just like this regulation and not being the person that I thought I was. I think that it's been like helpful to know how to process those things and just to be like, this human, but also like there's grief.
Yeah, totally, totally. No, I think any parent out there listening knows exactly what you mean. It's like we have these great intentions for being this ideal parent, and then, our stuff gets in the way and there's no perfection. And Marshall Rosenberg, I remember one of my favorite little quips of his. He said, if you want to put yourself in hell, believe that there's such a thing as a good parent. you know and yeah, so there is so much grief, even though, like you said, you're probably, creating so much more holding for them than the way you were held, even though your parents also had these, great intentions. It's like there is so much grief in just the reality of parenting, and the way that they grow. And I think, I mean, yours is still very little, but as they get older it becomes like, oh right, I'm like loving this person so hard so that they can eventually like leave and go off and do their thing. It's like, so there's so many layers
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. Even like going to daycare or like even just like the grief of them growing and like learning new skills. Like I've lost my cute little pudgy baby that doesn't do anything.
Yeah,
And like
totally. Yeah, for
my
sure.
cute little potato is gone. But
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, forever, right? And yeah, but I really love that you brought up that, what Francis Weller articulates as the second gate of grief, the places in us, it's that slow developmental trauma of the places that have not known love, because it's like the parts of ourself that. And I think for me, that also, as a parent, that's also been one of the most incredible parts of my journey, where um as my son went through different developmental phases, I would get to be like, oh, I remember what that was like. And was having a way different experience than he was having, in terms of how I was held and taken care of and all of that. And so I think with having these skills, like, it is such a powerful process to go through, that's much different than kind of just parenting in a less conscious way. So I love that that's been supportive for you. And
yeah,
yeah.
I feel like anytime we have like more language for like our experiences, that's
Totally. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Hmm. What else do I want to ask you? Let's see. What has surprised you most about integrating this work into your life and practice and work and whatever?
I don't know that I've like really I don't know that any of it was surprising per se. Like I feel like I kind of exist in the world where I'm like anything can happen. And I even think that like at the beginning of the training, it was like, what are some intentions? And I was like, just to see what happens. I don't know. I feel called to do this work, but I don't really know like what it's going to turn into, if it's going to turn into anything at all. Um, I think that I was also like pregnant through the whole training. So I think that that was like the biggest surprise because I had finally committed to it and then like immediately got pregnant and was like, well, I guess I'm going to do this anyways.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
Yeah,
right. Because
so
you remember you were like, well, I don't know, I'm trying to get pregnant. And then if I don't, then maybe I'll just go. And then you hadn't. And then so you're like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And then yeah, you like immediately, it was like the same month that we started, you got
yeah,
pregnant.
yeah, it was like the month I kind of like gave up on everything.
Right.
And
So
was just like, I'm just gonna start my life again. And then yeah, I got pregnant right away. So like, yeah, the entire journey through our training was just like different phases of like a growing human inside my body. And it so I felt like I also was like processing that at the same time. So and I think that that also seems to make sense for me because like I'm someone that likes a lot of intensity. So why not do like this big intense grief thing while pregnant? But I also think that there was like a lot of grief in just like pregnancy and body changes and things that could like that I got a chance to like process in a container that felt safe with like people who could like hold that, and that felt nice. I think okay, like maybe one of the things that is surprising is just like the abilities of the people in the group to hold space. Um, and I've seen that like ripple into the world. I'm not like talking actively to everybody, but like, yeah, I think that there are just like a lot of really powerful space holders, and I find it often quite difficult to like lean into space. I'm usually the space holder for that reason because I just like if people aren't like holding it in a way that feels supportive to me, I just like feel the facilitator in me just like step out and I'm like, I'm ready, I'm in charge. So it's
yeah.
sometimes hard for me to just like sit back and just like feel my feelings and be in it. And I feel like for like the majority of the time that I was in the training, I felt like I could just like sit back and be in it. And
Mm,
I think that that was surprising and nice. And
mm,
yeah, I think it was like you are a gifted facilitator, but there were also like it was I think I could do that because everyone in the room was too. So
yeah.
it was like not just like one person holding space, it was like we could all hold space together. And I think that that feels like really powerful. And I think I also saw how that was like powerful because we could all like be there for each other.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of like peer support of
Yeah.
really, yeah. Yeah. I remember you talking about that a lot during the training, just how you were able to drop in that space and that was, you're almost like, who cares what happens with what I do with it? It's like, this is great, and so needed. So I'm so glad that yeah, you got to have that support through, especially that like really sacred time of, this being growing in you. And you said that you're not, who knows what's going to happen with it, but I'm curious, like, do you have kind of ideas or like a vision of how this might continue to evolve in your life, say like 2 to 5 years from now? I mean, I know you're very focused on parenting right now, but yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in uh, an odd space right now. I knew that I might get laid off because we were given some like advance notice that that might happen. And I was like, cool, I'll just like go back to school and I'll be a counselor. Like I've wanted to do that for a long time. I'm just gonna do it. I'll have EI. So like if I don't get a job in the meantime, I'll have EI and then I can just go back to school in the fall if I haven't like found anything that feels like really good fit. And then I like immediately found out that I didn't qualify for EI.
Oh,
And was like, okay, well, I can't spend that amount of time without a job. And like one of the reasons I wanted to go back to school was so that I could like get jobs easier. And I'm like very interested in grief and how it shows up. I feel like it's like definitely like a really strong special interest of mine. Like anytime anyone mentions grief, I'm like, ooh, let's talk about it.
oh,
So like I feel myself like wanting to be pulled into this work and then also being like, well, I have to also support a family.
right.
And money is important, even though I don't want it to be. And like, just like the avenues of my previous like work experience is like leading me into a path that's kind of like taking me away from this.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I think that probably in like the next 2 to 3 years, I probably won't be doing anything like
Mm,
in a professional capacity with this unless I like end up stumbling into something that feels like that integrates somehow.
mm,
But I think that it's like not. off the table for the future. Like I don't see myself not like coming back. And it feels just like really integrative into my life. And I think that's something I've been talking to multiple people about. It's just that like I don't have to do this in a professional capacity for it to be valid. Like I don't need to like make this a living. I can just do this in my life because community is like more important to me than work. And yeah, so I don't know if it'll ever be like something that I get paid to do. Like I would love to like charge money for our circles, but like I also just like see our community and the struggles
Um,
um and I think that it's just like something that's really needed, and I think that it's like really valid to charge money for work, but like I don't know, it just feels like something that I need to do right now. It's just like community oriented. And I'll see what happens.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah. No, I really agree. It doesn't have to be a professional thing or something that you make money with. And I think, when I remember when my son was really small, and so I do often say this to people who have small children, is it's like when they're little, it is like what you spoke about in the beginning of our conversation, like creating that kind of almost like a bubble for them, and when we're holding this work in like a more professional capacity, it is fucking intense, like, in a way. And so I think like if you do end up doing that, I think, yeah, like in future years, and like because I think you'd have to be like really out there with it, in order to, but I think it is something that's very needed in like a larger way, like these kind of spaces for queer people. Like I think
Yeah.
you could definitely rock it out in Edmonton for sure in a bigger capacity
Yeah.
when you're ready. Hmm.
Yeah, and I've thought about like hosting a grief retreat. And that's actually like on the radar for this year, depending on how the next few weeks go.
Okay. Cool.
I Yeah, so I don't know. Again, in my brain, it's like that's not professional, but like it would be something that I'm charging for, at least in some capacity, to like rent space. I know another like really talented grief worker here as well, and I've been wanting to like do something with her, and she's very on board. But yeah, it's just been like about making it happen. So I'm curious about like maybe doing that either in like the late spring or early fall. And also I'm like cautious of like how many things I take on because
Yeah.
I take on a lot of stuff. And even though I'm not working, I still am like on a steering committee for a housing co-op and doing labor doula training and like hosting these circles and like doing all these other things and dating multiple people. And it's just like I always like take on like way too many things. So I'm just like trying to find the balance of my capacity. Um,
Yeah,
and also
totally.
this capacity. So I'm not just like constantly leaving to do other things.
Yeah, 100%. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Are you open to like queer people getting in touch with you if they're in your area? And
Yeah, definitely.
cool. And what would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
Mm, probably my Instagram.
Okay.
It's flyguy.circus, just like very not in line with this. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Um,
Great.
yeah, I think that that would probably be the easiest way. Or if they can reach out to you and you can like pass on email. I just don't want to like put that on the podcast.
Totally. No, that makes sense for sure. Yeah, we can put your Instagram handle in the show notes, and people can also reach out to me and I can pass them on for sure. That's great. Yeah, because what an incredible resource for folks who are living in Edmonton. That's really, really something special, I think.
Yeah. And also if just like people want to get more connected with the community, I have like many intertwined, like I'm very connected in many different ways. So
Yeah, you're such a community builder. I know that's amazing. It's definitely something I really admire about you. Um, so if just to wrap up, like if there was one essential teaching that you took away from our time together that you wish everybody knew, what would that be?
I think I already spoke to this. I think it's just like the pendulation between grief
Yeah.
and gratitude and how they can be like really complementary. That it's like okay to like set times on like and like containers that you can like feel everything in, and then to like, yeah, you either like set a timer or like just like have something that like pulls you back out so that you're not like completely distracted by the like the intensity of grief and other feelings.
Yeah.
um and also like being supported by gratitude. And I think that just like, yeah, building a gratitude practice is so important in many capacities. And just like, you can find things to be grateful for, then create them. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Totally. Yeah. And I mean, I think we always can find something,
Oh yeah, definitely.
it's like just sometimes it's like really opening our awareness to the very simple things, right? But I love that, and I love that you mentioned the idea of the container, like setting a timer or having some kind of way that's like, okay, this is the container. I'm gonna step in, feel it all, but then I'm gonna step out again. That's such a powerful practice and teaching for sure. That
And I don't think it's like that. I think that it's hard to just like leave everything behind, but I think just like the idea of that, even just like setting those parameters can be like a really powerful, because I think that so many people are just like afraid to step into those feelings and be like distracted. And like if it's your first time stepping into them, it might be,
yeah,
it
totally.
might it might be too hard. Like maybe you need support in that. Like it's okay to not do these things by yourself.
Yeah, that is also a really good point. Yeah, that it's like we're not really meant to do it on our own, especially if it's like early on in our process of learning how to do it. So, in which case, people can reach out to you or reach out to me. And, we've got lots of good containers that we're creating. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think that that's also just like a concept that I've taken, is that like you can't, I not that you can't hold grief alone, but like it's not meant to be held alone. Like it's meant to be held in.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, exactly. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you feel would be important to share? Like, especially, particularly, I mean, obviously, we have lots of people who are grieving who are listening to, but particularly if you're speaking to somebody who is considering jumping into the training this year, is there like one thing that you would want to say to them if they're like on the fence? Like, what would you say to them?
Um, no, I think I would just say like listen to your intuition. If it feels like you want to do it, just like figure out how to make it happen. Like it doesn't have to make sense. I think that that's also been like a really big learning of mine in the last few years, is that like things don't have to make sense.
Mhm.
So like even if like I was, I think one of the few or maybe the only one who like didn't have any like professional intention for this.
Yeah.
But it still feels like it was like really invaluable
Mhm.
to do
Mhm.
it anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that like if somebody doesn't know why they want to do it, but it still feels like they're called to, like maybe there's something bigger there, or maybe that there's like, yeah, I think personal growth is also really important in these spaces. And maybe it'll like, maybe it'll find you in a different way than you expected.
Totally. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, being okay with the unknown. Absolutely. Thank you. And is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you feel like you'd like to leave people with today? Mm.
It's okay to have hope.
Mm. Hmm.
Yeah, the world is hard right now. There's a lot of like really awful things happening, and just like, yeah, if everyone like right now could just like take a moment to like try and like think of some like little nuggets of hope that they see in society, I feel like that's what I would like to
Thank you. Yeah. Mhm. Thank you so much for
do.
taking
Yeah,
your
thank
time
you.
and being here with us today. So appreciate it.
It's really nice to chat with you again. It's been a while.
I know it has. It sure has. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Well, great to see you. And thanks to our listeners for listening. And definitely, if you're in the Edmonton area, reach out to Aiden. If you're interested in connecting and having support around community and grief and You know how to reach me as well. So thank you so much. Have a beautiful rest of your day. So before we close, I want to share an opportunity with those of you who feel called to this work. We're living in a time where grief is all around us, personal losses, collective trauma, ecological grief, and yet most people have nowhere to bring these feelings. We're carrying this weight alone, and it's crippling. And many of you already know this because you're seeing it in your practices. Your clients are bringing grief that needs more than just one-on-one work. They need ritual, community, and the ancient wisdom that our ancestors once carried. And this is why I created the Darkwoods Grief Tending and Ritual Facilitation Training. For those of you who are therapists, coaches, or healing practitioners, this training will transform how you work with clients in 3 powerful ways. First, your depth of presence. Beyond theory, you'll develop the embodied capacity to sit with the darkest, most intense emotions without flinching, without rushing to fix, and without taking it on yourself. This presence alone creates profound healing, and it comes through being supported yourself to be present with your own process. Second, practical structures. You'll learn rituals and frameworks that you can implement immediately. So these aren't abstract concepts, they're step-by-step processes that have been refined over years of work with hundreds of people. Third, energetic protection and health. So many of us in the helping professions end up burning out because we absorb other people's pain, or we get overwhelmed or dysregulated, and sometimes we aren't even aware of it. You'll learn sophisticated energetic and somatic practices to maintain your own deep well-being while doing this work. This is an 8-month immersion starting April 22nd, 2025, that includes 3 in-person retreats at Half Moon Haven on the beautiful west coast of British Columbia, 16 online training sessions with myself, as well as we'll probably have a few extra sessions with some amazing guest teachers, weekly grief support group participation where you get to observe and be mentored in to how we work in our groups at Darkwoods of Grief. You also get 6 personal mentoring sessions with me, as well as a comprehensive training manual and online resources. The investment is $6,300 with extended payment plans available. And now, for the first time ever, we also have an online only level 1 training called Roots of Ritual, Foundations of Grief Tending. So this is an online only version of the training that we're offering for the first time this year. This training is suited to those who are unable to travel for the in-person retreats to us here on the coast of BC, but are keen to develop your grief tending skills and learn structures and skills for group grief tending work and to build a foundation for ritual work. There will be opportunities to train with us in person in level 2 and 3 in 2020, starting in 2026. And so this online only training is shorter and will run from April 22nd through mid-August and is priced at $2,500 or 5 payments of $500. If you're interested in either of these trainings or just want to find out more and explore if this might be a beautiful next step for you, you can check out darkwoodsofgrief.com/facilitation-training or email us at info@darkwoodsofgrief.com, or you can always message us on any of our social channels, Instagram or Facebook as well. Links and contact info is in the show notes, and I look forward to hearing from those of you who feel called. All right, have a beautiful rest of your day.